What are some of the drawbacks of using comics in the classroom in the educational setting? What have you guys run up against?
People have a tendency to think of comics as being silly and not. When they think comics are being funny, and think superheroes. And I think that people get they're pigeonholed into this idea that comics are one thing. And when you start to broaden the understanding about how comics works, there's superhero comics, there are memoirs, there are comics about history, there are nonfiction things, and I think you're fighting in the battle of trying to get people to understand that comics are more than just Superman and Spider-Man and those kind of things. Comics are a much. It's almost like comics is not necessarily a genre. Like there's a separate thing that's comics, right? It's almost like saying all books are mystery. That's the idea that people have. Like all books are mystery, and that books are not all mystery. The English language is much broader than that. And so the visual language that cartoonists use is much broader than that. So I think a lot of times, you're fighting the idea that if it's comics, it's funny, but in reality, it's just a broad understanding of it. It could be funny, but not necessarily.
From my experience so far, I think there's been a lot of reporting about comics being used in classrooms and different types of formats that comics come in. So I don't think it's so much of an issue as in terms of like people misunderstanding comics. And I think what people are hungry for now, particularly librarians and school teachers, is how do you use them as tools? How do you embed them into your curriculum? And that's difficult for teachers who are crunched for time. So I think it's partially our job a little bit, to help teachers and to give them those types of ideas and how you can use comics as tools. And another example that I like to use is with Trickster. One of the beautiful things about it was one of the writers in the book, Michael Thompson. He was a high school teacher in Arizona, and he bought a bunch of copies and gave everyone in his class, and he taught in a heavily Native American area. And he gave everyone in his class a copy of the book. And the wonderful thing about it was those kids took it home and showed it to their parents. And a lot of times, especially in Native American culture, it's a very oral storytelling tradition. People forgot those stories, So the parents started reading them and said, "Hey, we got some of those stories. We can go talk to our elders. We can talk to our grandfather and grandfather." And so that was the one thing I think kind of helped them reconnect a little bit with their culture. And so it was just a different type of tool, And sometimes you have to see what works with your particular audience you're working with. And you're looking for that. What is that tipping point? What is that thing that's going to help propel to the next level?
Let me just add to that really quick. Jason starts that. I really like the idea of everybody buying the books. So I just wanted to say that again, like buying the books for everybody.
I really don't have much to add. These guys did it pretty well. I think it's really a matter of having credibility for your comics in a way, sort of something that takes it away from that this is a kid's book thing. So like the Colonial book and the other books I see too, there's this trend towards, so this book I went out and I found historians and professors of history essentially. And I said, "Hey, how would you like to do comics?" And a lot of people just like wrote this narrative and I gave it to an artist and they adapted it themselves and things like that. So that's sort of where I'm at. And as far as sort of buy-in, I think that's also important too. So as we were developing this thing with the Comic Museum, the more we talk about it, the more we start to realize, hey, we probably need a history teacher here so we can learn exactly what the kids need to learn and then sort of build this program we're doing a little bit more around it so it sort of augments that. And hey, the other way, we also need a librarian, we also need other people. So what we're trying to do is trying to find champions that can sort of help us develop a curriculum that satisfies a broader range. So it's not just kids coming to the Comic Museum and have this program, but it's something that can also sort of be transplanted into other environments entirely. So that's
one of the interesting. Well, I thought you were stretching it first. So.
I had just a statement. I noticed that when I worked at a library, I noticed that kids did flock more to the graphic novel history books, like they had about the Titanic, Gill, Chicago Fire, and they were all in graphic novel form, and I found out that you like that aspect of it.
yeah, I definitely think I should thank you. The comment was kids in the library tend to flock towards the history graphic novels, which is actually really good to hear. Thank you.
And those are all shelved together, right? Your collection is.
Well, I mean, they were more shelved in, I mean, they were shelved in like,
Do we file, or they have a separate section just for graphic novels?
We had a section for just manga.
Right.
And then our history graphic novels were just kind of intermixed throughout that main section. So, I don't know, maybe we would have had regular shelf.
Right.
How many books might have helped, but they still found them. They still found them on the shelf.
There's good book if you can afford to do both. It's very successful. However, what seems to be evolving in the library market in places where graphic novels have really taken off, it's a retail type presentation where the graphic novels comics section is all together. Manga, superheroes, everybody's together because next generation readers it's already programmed for them. But now you're also getting a more educated audience. You've got the first generation manga readers who are now in their 30s who can look and figure that there's biographies here, there's romances, and they're mixed in with all the other, they're innocent. But the best way to really, I think, to boost it from everything that I've seen is a concentrated collection, and it's like that'll be destroyed immediately. You'll see where there's just 4 or 5 months that you've had 50.
My book
Everybody
was
can
actually,
most of you guys, anybody who's collecting?
Well, no, I was saying that that's what I found in the manga section, that where you know, so if we let, that's why we kind of intermixed the history graphic novels into the regular collection. There weren't many that get found. I knew where they were.
Right.
They knew how to go right to them. We got new ones in to display them, just
You got some serious fans that help spread the word there, apparently. And there was one thing I wanted to jump in on the educational surprise, at least from my experience. There's been these crazy arguments ongoing for the comics industry. They're not for kids, they are for kids, they're for adults, they're all these things and everything. And so I thought we were kind of reached a point where that had plateaued, and then I got this email from somebody who said, asked me about books for kids with spectrum disorders. And I didn't realize until that question came to me how many people I know in the comics industry who are ADHD or spectrum disorder or something. But comics got them through, put the words in context. So I was given this link for this woman who writes this blog about her son with autism. And the way he described reading to her with text was, it's a pile of letters on a page. And somebody had given him a comic at school, and all of a sudden his world had opened up. And she said, now these are books that I've got a list of these books that I recommended. And I was like, oh, these are going to be the high-low stuff. And it was high school level, honors grade level books that this boy was reading at the age of 12. But because he said the comics put it in context. And I thought that was so cool that now it just changed my perception yet again of comics, is that the same book is used for 3 different types of readers. The challenge reader, the gifted reader, or the one who just needs to finish a text. Everybody takes away something different from the same book. And along those lines then, some of the best things that you've seen so far is how your books have been used in a library setting or in a classroom. I mean, Matt, you talked a little bit about the stuff in DC. I had a thought there.
my books, what I've been seeing with what people have been telling me about my books is the thing that I said about the 28 Days Are Not Enough, is that if you have a very diverse population, a lot of kids who are minorities, then you're showing them books about people who look like them. While I don't think that's a focus, like you always should have a book that looks like you, like people that look like you that relate to you. But William Warringer wrote a thing about empathy in art, which in a lot of ways means that if in order to reach a group of people with a work of art, you have to empathize with them. You have to get involved with them. You have to see something of yourself in them. And I remember when I was in college, I had to take a class called The Comic Voice. And as a black man in the South, one of the funny books that they had us read was The Divine Secrets of the Yaya Sisterhood. And if you are a black man in your 20s, reading that book, it is like the worst thing ever in the world. It's not funny. It's not even remote. So it was like that was the thing that clued me into William Morgan's empathy and heart. Because it's not that I can't relate to a female character. I just couldn't relate to these female characters. And so to have students, to be able to show students things that actually relate to them, it's helpful in the beginning because it will help them eventually broaden their horizons to other things so they don't feel so isolated. Because what happens is as you get older, if you have never been exposed to those kind of things, then you only want those things now because you've never been exposed to it. So if you expose kids to those things earlier, then they're actually going to be broader on the long run.
When I do some of my comics workshops, another thing that I do is talk about culture, kids' culture. When I do these workshops, I look around, there's such great diversity in communities that you use these, when I do these workshops, I don't tell kids like, okay, we're going to draw a comic, draw a superhero. I tell them, tell me a story about themselves. And it could be something that happened that day, it could be something with their brother or sister, or it could be something different. Sometimes you're just amazed by what kids put on a piece of paper. It could be something that's bothering them inside, and it's just another way for kids to express themselves. It's an opportunity for them to kind of tell their story, to communicate. Just like we're talking about how we convey information by kids reading it. That's it kind of goes both ways. You can use comics to help them open up a little bit and have a conversation with you as well.
I actually thought I didn't have sorry, go ahead. No, please. I really don't have much to add to this one because my first book is kind of you're asking for recommendations on graphic novels for kids with disabilities.
Or if we have some coming out of people that have disabilities. With Strange Fruit, the way I came about it is sort of organic, so a lot of the stories were told to me. People would tell me about these people and these things. And when I started researching for Strange Fruit 2, I realized there were uncelebrated narratives, and then there are uncelebrated narratives, so that means people from the queer community, disabled people, and women. So a lot of the stories that are coming out in my second volume of Strange Fruit will deal with those kind of things. So that will have it'll be a little bit more diverse. So it'll have some disabled people. One time Wiggins, who was a autistic savant who could play music, who was also known as the last American slave. He will be there. Bayard Rustin, who was the civil rights activist who organized the March on Washington. He was an openly gay man. Nobody ever really talks about him, so he'll be in the next book. So I'm doing. So there are other narratives that I'm going to get involved in. Straight from volume 2.
John can probably talk about this in greater detail as we're familiar with it in the books, but there are plenty of books out there that come out over the past few years about people with disabilities, mental disabilities, also disease like cancer. I think we were talking about this yesterday. One thing that's I think kind of lacking is like there haven't been too many medical books about, except for cancer and things like that, but other types of disabilities. And there's actually a conference going on right now in Baltimore on medicine and comics. And there are doctors and there are medical illustrators that are interested in getting into comics, using comics. But they don't know how to do that. So that's why they're trying to work with some comics creators on making that happen. Again, it's taking complex subject and kind of putting it in a format that's easy to digest. Kind of like a journalist writing an article. If you're tackling a tough issue, you have to find a way to grasp the concept and present it in a way to your readers that everyone understands it.
There was to follow up on the graphic medicine conference, books like Seeds and Mom's Cancer, Swallowing Whole. The great thing about those stories for the physicians is they get to see the story from the patient's side. They've always been on the analytical side, and some of the most brilliant doctors out there have nothing for personalities, but they're great research teams. And it helps put that into, again, context is a great word for this, but it helps put those in lot of that really is because of the work that you guys have done over the years. There have been many of you who've offered comics in the libraries and in classrooms for more than 30 years. And now we're seeing publishers producing great books that you can literally easily walk in and argue the case that this is a great piece of literature. Not too long ago, circulation was the magic word to use for your record. Now this truly is great literature that they create. You see that these folks they're not fabricating stuff to fit the moment. They're telling stories that have existed for a long time and now have an opportunity. One of the questions we have, we talked about this program for about a week or so, and how some of this stuff they've seen it applied in this setting. And so now we're starting to see where there's schools that are collaborating more with their public libraries, because the public librarians have been able to get away with some stuff and buy graphic novels that schools have not been allowed to do yet. And one of the things that Matt's had experience with is using comics as supplemental material. Do you want to touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. When you have people that maybe don't understand comics or how they can be used in the classroom, the best way just pitch it to them. It's another form of media, you know. So you can have your textbook, and teachers are okay bringing film into the classroom, but sometimes they're a little bit hesitant about comics. Whereas I don't understand that, because it's just another vehicle, another tool. You know, you're looking for something that kind of bring kids out of their shell, enjoy the experience, and have them want to learn.
It made me think of something. There was a workshop I did in Illinois a few years ago, and it was an insert. So the front row and three rows of teachers are into this. They're comics fans. Middle row, it's in service time. They'll pay a little bit of attention. The back row are the kids that they ridicule in their own classes for not being interested in being in the room. And so there was one guy that was kind of chuckling in the back, and I know now enough not to terrorize people from the podium. But I challenged him. I said, I want you to come up here and sit down with me, and we're just going to do an exercise to show basically the thought processes involved in creating a comic. And it was a stick figure, and showing Johnny Run, because for those of us of a certain age, we see Dick Run as the regular book we're reading. And so he did the stick figure, and you can see now he's like, oh crap, I've got to draw. I said, okay, now let's make this a little bit different. Why is he running? It's no longer see Dick run. So I wrote underneath, actually I wrote it as pop bubble above it. Crap, I forgot the milk. And put a little sweat drop. And so it changed everything for him. I said, and then I brought up a slide. It shows Norman Rockwell next to Gary Larson's Why Dinosaurs Are Extinct. And I said, it's the same kind of complex approach to art in telling a story. No matter how simple Larson's drawing is, it still conveys the story. Anybody familiar with that one? The three dinosaurs, the brontosaurus is playing lookout, Tyrannosaurus can't hold the cigarettes because his arm is too short. And but it's really amazing that when you actually put the pen in the hand of that person who's objecting to comics and show them really how complex this is, and the skill set for people who draw and write their own story is pretty amazing.
I just want to add another example. I was at a school this springtime, and the kids they have a drama class, and they used the concept of a comic to do their storyboards. Essentially, that's what comics, a storyboard is. So instead, they're putting on this play, and the teacher said, "Okay, we're going to do a storyboard." Everyone in the class had to do their own storyboard of that particular, or their segment of what they were going to be involved in storyboarding. So when they're all done, they put it all together and put it up on the wall, critiqued it, put what they, pulled out what they liked, left what they didn't like. So it was a great way. And they, basically that was a comic model. They're using the comic as a tool for their drama class.
And actually, if you take some time, if you have a relationship with your local comic shop, it's a good place to start, but you have creators who live near your library. One of the best things you can do is bring them in and have them show their storytelling process, which is totally different than when you bring an author in, because an author can talk to you about how they do stuff. But with a creator there and a large sketch pad, it's amazing to see how quickly, even ADHD kids in the room, shut down just to watch what's going on up on stage. And they're real. I haven't met a comics person yet who wasn't giving enough to come in to sit down and do an hour, just to hang out and show you what the work is. Because it's nice, it gets them out of the house, away from their studio for a little bit. Okay, we're going to go ahead and turn this over to questions then, if you've got some. Fire away, speak loud, please, because this room absorbs a lot of sound. Oh, we do have this presentation, I apologize. One more thing.
Just a statement. So,
I'm saying, while Jill's loading up, just so you know, we'll be doing a signing afterwards in the back with our books, and we also have signings tomorrow at the consortium booth.
So one of the things that people have been asking me about specifically is how I came about Strange Fruit. And it all started with a self-portrait that I did in 2006, which was a reaction specifically to living in New England, being born in the South and living in New England and approaching and discovering racism, because it was like I discovered racism almost again. So I was where I'm from in Virginia. There was a Klan march in my town when I was in 3rd grade, and I was never afraid to go anywhere. So I moved to Boston, which is supposed to be the bastion of liberalism, and people started telling me not to go to these different neighborhoods. This series of paintings that I did about lynchings, this one was called Strange Fruit Harvested and Cut the Root. And it's about specifically like the idea of how far we've come and how far we still have to go. This was the most successful out of 10 paintings. The rest of them were not successful, so I'm not going to show you any bad paintings. But when a friend of mine said my paintings were trying to tell stories and failing. And so it pushed me to go back into discovery, to looking at comics. So what I started doing was developing comic ideas. So one of the stories was the story of Henry Box Brown, who was a slave who mails himself in a box from Virginia to Philadelphia. And when I did this story, like I said earlier, people started telling me other stories. And as people would tell me other stories, I'm a huge Chris Ware fan, so I wanted my own sort of acting novels in the library. Chris Ware's series of comics that he does, so I wanted to have something that was connected to what I'd done before, so I started with the idea of calling the book Strange Fruit, which are not uncelebrated areas from Black history, and I was fortunate enough to get Henry Louis Gates Jr. to write the forward to the book. And the other thing I talked about a little bit about was how I use racist imagery in my work, because I think it's really important not to blank it out, but not to like make it a star, a hashtag, and dollar signs. I wanted it to actually be much more relevant than that. So the way I typically deal with those things is I started with the idea of a symbolism of having these crows to represent Jim Crow or all the racists in my book. And I originally was going to draw people who sort of look like crows, and then I decided just to make them all crows. So all of the races in my book are always black crows. And that's how I typically deal with that language. Now, what that does for the student and any kid that actually looks at this, it's a place to sort of talk about what that racist imagery is, because it still permeates. The minstrel idea is still out there right now, and I don't think people are spending enough time looking at it and thinking about it, and it raises really good questions. The other thing it does is that when you look at this is 2 pages from the Malaga Island story, which is a story about an interracial community that was destroyed by the state of Maine in the early 1900s. And some of the people could pass for white, so they tried to integrate into the society, but when people would see them, they would point it out and say things. And so what I wanted to do was sort of separate that racist stereotype from the actual person that they're actually looking at and calling that name, so that there actually is a disconnect between what you think that person is and actually how those people are treated. And I do that, and this is another example of the crows. The crows don't speak, they only say caw in the book, and they just sort of become ravenous. The murder, like the crows, a flock of crows is called a murder. So using that kind of understanding, like the metaphor in my books, which I stole from a lot of other people who use those things. So I just steal those ideas and just turn them into my own. So I do that a lot, and I'm dealing with it a lot in my next book, which is called Tales of the Talented 10. And it's it's the story of the first, the most successful U.S. Marshal in American history. And so all of the antagonists in that book are crows, and then all of the language again, I'm using that language a lot. I'm using some of it for Native Americans too. So I'm actually using the sort of the mascot for the Washington Redskins. I'm using that image when they talk about derogatory terms to the Native Americans. Because I think that's actually a disconnect too. People don't understand that. So there's a poem if you can find it called "This Is Why I Would Never Buy a Jeep Cherokee," and I think it's a really good thing to think about. But I'm using that image too to sort of bring awareness to that idea that those things are separate from those people. And that's going to be in my the book, The Tales of the Talented 10. So that's how I try to deal with. I'm trying to talk really fast, so I'm sorry. But I try to deal with those things to give students some kind of a reference, or give anybody a reference for what those things actually meant to the people who were actually calling them. So.
All right, well, we're going to turn it over to you guys now for questions. And again, please speak loudly because we need to hear you. We'll share the question with everybody. All right. Okay, well, without further ado, then we're going to move over to the table. The guys will be signing their books and we'll have a chance to talk to them up close and personal. Thank you very much, folks, for coming out here today. Appreciate it.
Thank you guys for coming.